All right, 7 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Gosh, things are maybe back to normal. I know if you have no electricity right now, it's not back to normal for you. And hopefully that won't be much longer before you're back on as well. But feels almost back to normal, actually. So hopefully we've been part of that, keeping things normal as possible. A couple of years ago, there was I was watching... I fell in love with this thing that Jerry Seinfeld was doing called Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. And if you've never seen this segment, and I think Netflix bought it, so I don't find it online anymore.
Okay.
And I'll see it on Netflix. But anyway, that's like a tangent right there. Anyway, he would invite famous guests, like one guest at a time, a comedian, and they would ride in a car that he was either loaned or owned or something. And they would go get coffee, and in the process, they would have a conversation, and so it became like a cool format for a talk show.
Okay.
One of his guests one time was, oh my gosh, Chris Rock. Sorry, I thought I was thinking of the wrong name. Chris White. Chris Rock was his guest. So Jerry Seinfeld is driving this Lamborghini in New Jersey, and he gets pulled over. Mm-hmm. Right? He's speeding, and he gets pulled over. Mm-hmm. And Chris Rock is very, very funny, because he's afraid because he's getting pulled over. Now, there's a policeman coming to his car. And there was a quote from it, and I looked it up so I could read it. It said, "It would be such a better episode if he pulls me to the side and beats the," I'm going to say heck, it's not what he said, "out of me." He said, "If you weren't here, I'd be scared. Yeah, I'm famous, but I'm still black." All right. Now, that's a commentary on the fact that by being African American sometimes in our culture, I hate to say this because my father was a policeman and my father would have never done some of the things you hear about. And 99% or more of the policemen who are out there right now would never do some of those things. But, you know, that 1%, it's kind of like going into the ocean. You got a very small chance of getting bit by the shark, but one shark is all it takes, right?
Of course.
So what is it is it possible? There was a story about one of our judges here in Florida who's a lady who happens to be African American also, and she was pulled over, and she kind of got the bad treatment too, and you kind of have to cock your head to one side and say, what is actually going on? I don't know the answer to what's going on. And I'm not taking sides, and I'm certainly not bashing the police. If you are a police officer, know that I love and respect all of you, regardless of race or anything. My dad was a policeman, and I know you have a thankless job to do. However, these news stories do make you want to stop and take a moment and say, well, what do we tell our children? What do we tell our children? What do we tell our friends as far as how to better survive in a world where people are a little trigger happy? And don't jump down my throat for saying that. There's no way you can deny that is happening in some cases. And everything I said right there. Dr. Geoffrey, maybe it's pronounced Geoffrey. I may be mispronouncing his first name already. Dr. Geoffrey Varner, I'm sorry, is on the phone. He has written a book called Home Alive, 11 Must Steps to Surviving Encounters with the Police. Dr. Varner is a board-certified emergency medicine physician. He's a father. Maybe that's the biggest reason he wrote the book. He's the founder of Lifeline Medical. He runs marathons. He's the recipient of numerous awards and honors that include the Mayor's Citizen Award, the District of Columbia Hospital Association STEM Award, the State of Maryland Governor's Citation Award, and it goes on and on and on. Dr. Geoffrey, I'm going to guess, Geoffrey Mount Varner. Good morning, sir. What an honor.
Good morning, and a great lead-in. I loved your initial story, but thank you very much for having me.
And just correct my pronunciation. Is it Geoffrey?
It's Geoffrey, yes,
okay.
Geoffrey.
Okay, well, thank you. Are you a practicing doctor in D.C. right now?
I currently practice in D.C. and Baltimore as well.
Wow. So I'm guessing you work with the police, and are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing? I'm a radio announcer. I'm not out there. You're in the emergency rooms. So is it 99% of the police are pretty good, and there's that 1% that's the issue?
I actually think that you are dead on. Most police officers are very good, and they are here to do the right thing. However, they're also trained that at their goal at the end of the shift is to make it home alive. And I think that is a reasonable and very practical goal. I think that we as citizens need to make that our goal too, to make it home alive, to survive the police encounter. And I think that while these problems are being worked out, and it's going to take years, there are some immediate fixes that we can do to help this whole crisis.
Okay. Now, before we say anything else, I thought this was going to be a police bashing book, and I was happy to see that it wasn't. And I was also happy to see that you're really giving some good advice. And I'm guessing this comes from being a father. I mean, you must be petrified sometimes. How old are your children?
Larry, you hit the nail on the head. I have an 11-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl. So,
oh my gosh,
that was the genesis for this. You are absolutely correct.
14-year-old girl, almost dating age. You're gonna go nuts in about a year or two.
Hey, it's a whole nother subject now.
All right, my gosh. Okay, so tell me, what kind of advice do you have, and is it across the board? Do these things apply to me, a 62-year-old white man, as much as it does to your soon-to-be 17-year-old daughter when she's dating? Oh my gosh, I don't want to be in your shoes right now. You're looking at some scary moments.
And it's funny, I didn't feel uncomfortable during this interview until you mentioned my 14-year-old.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But this book is actually meant for everyone. So while you touched on it, black males bear the brunt of this American crisis, that they're 5 to 9 times more likely to be killed compared to their white peers. What people need to recognize is that 3.4 Americans are killed each day. That's double than any other industrialized country in the world. So yes, this book applies to you, to teenagers, and I can tell you the most at risk are young males of any color. Why? Because let's think back to when we were 15 to 25. We thought we were invincible. And there are certain steps that we have to take when we encounter the police.
So we would encounter the police for one of two reasons. Either we've broken the law, or we've committed some kind of a traffic violation, which is not exactly the same thing as, well, it is, but it isn't. You know what I mean? In other words, we've either robbed the convenience store, or we went through a stop sign. We rolled through a stop sign. In both cases, there's going to be a policeman up against you.
You're right. So my book is probably not leaned towards the hardened criminal. It is leaned towards the simple traffic stops,
right.
The domestic calls. Most people do not realize that 40% of all police killings start off as either a simple traffic stop or a domestic call.
Domestic
call meaning that yes, and so there is this targeted population and targeted environment that we can reap the biggest benefit if we address it. For instance, as I talked about earlier, officers, their most dangerous time is when they pull someone over or they stop someone. That's a dangerous period of time for them, and it doesn't matter what color you are, mm-hmm. because the officers are trained to make it home alive.
Yeah,
so we have to do whatever we can to make the officer feel safe during that initial stop.
Okay. So tell me what we do wrong first, and then tell me what we should do right. There was that story, that horrible story, and I think it was Orlando, where the woman Facebook Live to her basically the death of her boyfriend.
Yeah.
And when you watch the video, like a few months later, when they released the police dash cam video, it kind of made you wonder what really happened there, because he said, "I have a gun," and the policeman says, "Keep your hands on your lap," and apparently he didn't. Mm-hmm. And then the policeman just shot him, and then he died.
Yeah.
So
hers was modified.
So, and in answer to your question, what we do wrong is we don't recognize that at that moment you are in a very dangerous position. when you are stopped. So you have to go into immediate survival mode. That officer, he's not your friend. He is not there to engage in simple conversation with you. His immediate goal is to make sure that he's safe, and then your immediate goal is to make sure that you get out of that situation home, to get out of that situation alive and make it home alive.
That makes sense.
There are simple steps. For instance, when you're pulled over, if your windows are tinted, roll down all your windows before the officer even gets there. If it's dark at night, turn that inside console on so that the officer can see what is in the car. Because because the safer the officer feels, the less likely there is for escalation.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Right now in our community, when a person is stopped by a law enforcement officer, we have to stay in the car. Years ago, like when I was speeding and I got out of the car and had my information with me, but now they prefer you be in the car. Should we just get out of the car? Wouldn't that be safer?
Well, state law is different on getting out of the car. But most states recommend that you stay in the car. I'm going to recommend something else based upon my 2,000 hours worth of research and multiple interviews with officers. When you're first pulled over, unlike we were trained, when we were pulled over, we were taught reach in the glove compartment, get your ID, and so forth and so on.
Right.
When you're first pulled over, don't move. Look forward, keep your eyes straight, and don't move. Don't give the officer any reason to believe that you're reaching for something. Wait till the officer comes to the door, and then ask, officer, is it okay for me to reach wherever you are reaching to and get my license and registration?
Oh.
Wow. That's got to be scary at that moment for that police officer, because he doesn't know what you're going to pull out of that glove compartment.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's why I share with my citizens. It's a heightened period of time for the officer and for you. So make that officer feel safe. Don't give him any reason to doubt your actions.
Wow. I have a messy glove box. I got to clean it up because I'll be shuffling through there looking for my stuff. All right, so that's a good one. I like turning the lights on, rolling the windows down. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I think staying in the car makes sense to me. I don't know what the law is, but I got out one time and the policeman said, "Get in the car," and I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. All right.
Absolutely. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
In fact, in Maryland, the law says that you have to stay in the car.
Okay.
We see sometimes at traffic stops that there are two police cars, stopping the one person, and I always thought that was for extra safety precaution for the police officers.
You're right. The whole law enforcement community is centered around making sure that the officer is safe. And believe it or not, I do agree that we also should sit around making sure the officer is safe. Because what studies have I shown? If the officer feels safe, situations de-escalate. And this is the part that I find that most citizens, especially young people, have a problem with. You should accept that when you are first pulled over, the officer has all the power. They are in control of that stop. That's not the time for activism. That's not the time for you to talk back. That's your time to be quiet and deal with the situation appropriately.
Talk about the circumstance that you see in the news all the time where a group of students at a school or a college or whatever, they decide they're going to protest something and things get out of hand. If my child was in that peace, what is supposed to be a peaceful gathering, that starts to escalate with no fault of your own, I would tell my son, get out of there. Don't even be in that group, And what is your thoughts on that? It seems like, okay, I'm supporting something that I believe in. I'm going to carry a sign, and then a couple of knuckleheads decide to really cause some problems. Next thing you know, the police are there with the shields up. What is your advice? Just go home? Just get out.
Yeah, right. It's funny. Because again, as we talked about, I now have a daughter who is 14 now, and even my son, I share with him, hey, I can fix you. I can make you feel better from any interaction you have with an officer if you make it home. If you don't make it home and you're dead, I can't fix that. Hence, I'm all for activists, I'm all for marching, but Brooke, as soon as you think that situation becomes unsafe, immediately get out of it, because your goal is to make it home alive, and the officer's goal is to make sure that they're safe. And so, any time there is tension and it is stress, get out of the situation when it comes to marching, that is.
When you were doing your interviews, were the officers skeptical at first, or did they get what you were trying to do for your book?
So it was very interesting, because often I would catch officers after they have just brought in LI trauma, or while I was interviewing the officer as well as I was interviewing the patient. Combine that with other interviews where the officers knew my sister. So where I live, both of my sisters are judges. Oh. So they felt more trusting of me. But what I had learned, and which is different from where I started off, was that many of the officers I interviewed recognized that there was a problem. But I can also say that what I've learned is that 99% of officers are good people who want to do the right thing, but who also want to make it home alive too.
My father would have told you, if he were here, seeing firsthand from the policeman's perspective, the same thing I said, that 99% of them are good, but he would not deny the 1% that are bad. He would not have said, no, there are no bad ones. He himself told me there was a couple of movies that were out, and I don't know when this would have been, the 70s or 80s, and and there was one movie where they were throwing somebody off of a roof and just letting him die. Somebody they were chasing. Instead of taking him in, they just threw him off the roof. And I thought, wow, I wonder if that really happens. And I asked my dad, and he said, yeah, that actually happens. Mm-hmm. Oh. And so it's, and if you're a police officer, please, I am not bad-mouthing you, because I know most of you. And but I think this is really good information, not just, your young people specifically, males specifically, and then the most focused group, probably black males, especially black young males, right? I'm guessing. Does that sound accurate?
Right, absolutely. Yes, yeah. And then I do appreciate your plea to the police, and this is not a police bashing book, but I also think this is bigger than the police. This is an American problem. And in every institution, when we realize there is a problem, then we fix it. For instance, within medicine, I used to be able to handwrite orders 10 years ago. But what we found was that doctors' handwritings and the nurse taking the orders off led to thousands of lives being lost. Okay. So we made adjustments. Let's carry that to the police. We now recognize that there is a problem. So this is not about bashing them. This is about fixing a problem that will help make America a better place.
Yeah, and I think a message to young people. There's a brave element to your book. You're brave because you're telling it like it is, and you're telling it with the intent of it reaching the people who need to be reached, at the risk of seeming like a police basher. And that is not what you're doing. I completely understand what this is about. I didn't in the beginning, I'll be honest. When I first read the topic and read the PDF, I thought, okay, this is going to be police bashing. It was not. I had no idea who you were. I didn't know your color or anything, or your credentials, by the way, at that time. But I could see from just reading the content of the book that you had your act together, and you were a smart guy, and you were giving really good, usable advice. I worked at the juvenile detention center here for a while, and I would have loved somebody to come in. Yeah, and I would have loved somebody like yourself to have come in there and spoken to those kids with this exact message.
Yeah, and I thank you very much for that insight. And I think that the message is even simpler that the parents should give to our children, and that is, when you're pulled over or stopped, that's not the time for activism. That's not the time for you to speak your mind. it's your time to go into survival mode. Survive the encounter. So all the activism stops during that stop. And if something goes wrong, something not right happens, getting out of that situation safely allows those at home to help you deal with what went wrong. Because as I tell my kids, if they're dead, there's nothing I can do to fix them.
Right.
And that is extremely good insight, because so many times when people are stopped, they're automatically thinking, I didn't do anything wrong, and they're going to be on the defensive and then go in the offense mode. So they have to
absolutely
they have to realize for themselves that, okay, I must have done something wrong. Let me listen instead of being antagonistic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then Larry, you mentioned some. So those 1% officers that are bad, there's nothing that we can do with that. But there's a number that I can't give you a definite number, but part of this is there's a fear that the officers have when they approach that car. And it's that fear gap that based upon my research, closing that fear gap, the fear that the officer has of the citizen, would be extremely helpful. And one way we control that is control the controllables, meaning the citizens. They've got to make steps to close that fear gap that the officer has during that initial stop.
The book is called Home Alive. It is a very profoundly dead-on book. It's written by our guest, Dr. Geoffrey Varner. I have a copy of the book, 11 Must Steps to Surviving Encounters with the Police. If you want the copy that was sent to me, you are welcome to it. The rest of us have to go buy it. Dr. Varner, give us a website we can go buy the book on.
They go to Dr. Saving Lives. That's drssavinglives.com. drssavinglives.com. It's also available on Amazon as well. And let me also say, Larry and Robin, thank you very, very, very much, because I think that this is a great community service, and because it doesn't matter what color you are. This is an American problem that we can all pitch in and help.
5-star review on Amazon, by the way.
Wow.
Good job. Thank you so much for being on the air with us today.
All right, thank you very much.
We will be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Chris Foster. President Trump speaking at the United Nations General Assembly for the first time, saying it's time for all nations to completely isolate North Korea over its weapons program.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
That's the president's nickname for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. He also accuses Iran's leaders of stealing their nation's wealth to pay for terrorism. The president's oldest son has given up his Secret Service protection.
Donald Trump Jr. was said to be seeking more privacy. The president's other children and grandchildren will continue to be covered by the agency. The news follows reports that the Secret Service has become overburdened by the size and lifestyle of the Trump family, which frequently travels around the globe for business.
Fox's John Decker. White House counsel Kellyanne Conway has also dropped her Secret Service protection. Fox News. We report, you decide.
For many businesses, hiring is tough. You want access to highly qualified candidates fast. And you don't want to sign a long-term contract or pay upfront fees. That's why you need Indeed.com.